Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on August 31st, 2021. Before we begin, I will remind Council that this portion of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. I'll start with a roll call of Council for the benefit of those watching this meeting. I, Mayor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Martin. Councillor McMillan.
Present.
Councillor Merlihan.
I'm present.
Councillor Redicott.
Present.
And Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Thank you. We'll start with the motion to reconvene in open session. Moved by Councillor, Merlihan, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? And that's carried. I'll start off by acknowledging the land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for about 10,000 years, and we acknowledge the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Also, before we start tonight, I want to say that our hearts are with our Afghan neighbors and residents as we hear news reports of the withdrawal of the troops from Afghanistan. The uncertainty and fear for loved ones is something most of us will never experience. As we begin this evening's meeting, let's take a moment to remember that we all come to our lives carrying different burdens at any given time. So let's start with a moment of silence to reflect on injustices both near and far. Thank you. We do have an item to come forward from closed session today. It is appointment to the Woolwich Heritage Committee. And I would entertain a motion that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report C09-2021, respecting an appointment to the Woolwich Heritage Committee, appoints Emily Brown to the board for a term ending December 31st, 2022. Mover and seconder, Councillor Merlihan, seconded by Councillor Redicott. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. A motion that the following minutes be adopted as presented unless someone has any concerns with them. That is the special council minutes from August 10th, 2021 and the committee of the whole minutes from August 24th, 2021. Someone like to move those? Councillor Shantz and seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have no planning public, we have no presentations and no delegations this evening and no unfinished business. There are two items, to be approved and received for information. One is a liquor license recommendation for Murphy's Law, and then there were a number of BIA, St. Jacobs BIA minutes and a consultant package for the proposed telecommunications tower on Woolwich Street in Breslau. Would someone like, to move those items? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Motion that council convenes into committee of the whole, moved by Councillor Redicott, seconded by Councillor Merlihan. All those in favor? That's carried. A motion, a motion that the summary of recommendations of the committee of the whole dated August 24th be adopted. We have, we have the Heritage Train Station funding request, the boundary road agreements between Guelph, Aramosa, and Mapleton, updated procedural bylaw, the special service levy survey results for the unserviced areas of Breslau, and the Woolwich Street North Reconstruction Project selection of engineering consultant are the recommendations coming from Committee of the Whole. Would someone like to move those? Pick two. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Merlehan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of staff reports and memos, and I will call on our Director of Finance and Treasurer, Richard Petherick, to start us off. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just some highlighted comments regarding the second quarter statements, and particularly these are the statements that are ending on June 30th of this year. From the financial aspect, starting in the operating budget, we spent about 4.9% of the net operating levy, which gives us a positive operating variance of about 4.2%. So that means we're tracking fairly well, better than budget. We're in a surplus position of approximately $451,000. Kind of a big change from where we were this time last year. We were well within the pandemic, and we were sitting at a deficit position of about $280,000. So you could tell much different year. Not saying that COVID has gone away, not saying that we're not still feeling the impacts of COVID. And as the report indicates, still feeling some of these things within the recreation and community services area. Our revenues in that area are down about 16% of where they would normally be if we use 2019 as our last normal or a proxy year. But one of the things to point out still to Council, mentioned it in the first quarter report, is we have received funding under the Safe Restart Agreement as well as the COVID-19 Recovery Funding Grant. The amounts are listed in the report. And we still continue to put a proportional share, or in these statements, 2 quarters worth of those grants within the operating statements, and they total approximately $404,000. So even if we took out the funding that we received, we would still be in a small surplus position. So with that funding being put in, it kind of helps shape kind of where we are right now. One of the other things that we're tracking, and we brought it up to Council in the first quarter report, is with our supplemental tax. As the report indicates, we have an allocation in the 2021 budget about $220,000. As I mentioned in the first quarter report, we had about 200 residential houses or housings that are on properties that were never picked up by MPAC. They've been picked up this year. I said I would kind of report to you about some of the things that's what it's going to look like and how it's going to shape out. So while nothing was recorded from really the new assessment in the statements ending in June, we're starting to see that in the July and August statements. And so far, we're tracking about $489,000 in additional supplemental tax. And we still have some additional runs coming this year. So we will be tracking fairly significantly above budget as we get to the end of the year. So while I said, we're tracking in a very good surplus position, there are a number of things that we typically see this time of year that we haven't recorded. Most of them are contained within the infrastructure services, such as a gravel resurfacing, surface treatment, and a lot of the pavement works. Not untypical that we don't see them at the ending of June, because sometimes they're actually starting to ramp up during this period. And we're going to start to see those expenditures start to be recorded. So right now, very little has been recorded in the budget. It makes up a pretty big chunk of our expenditure, especially in infrastructure services. So as we get through the remainder of the year, I think you're going to start to see some of the surplus numbers drop because of that. But I still think we're going to be in good shape still going forward into 2021. So just really touching briefly on the water and wastewater. Still in a surplus position in wastewater, about $219,000, almost $220,000, which is favorable for us. We're in a small deficit position, about $1,000 in the water program. To me, I would say we're tracking right on budget. That is really good. That's kind of within the zone we want to be in. On the capital budget side, no different than I said from some of the infrastructure services on the operating. We're really getting really geared up for a lot of our reconstruction and some of our infrastructure projects. The tenders have been awarded, the work's continuing on. We just haven't quite seen the the invoices yet, but as we start to get through the third quarter and even at the fourth quarter, we'll be receiving those invoices. But as we've done in the past with council, we've provided some information in the capital summary sheets that really gives an indication of where some of these projects are. And we do have some of our directors and managers on the line as well, in case council has any questions with regards to those projects. So at that, Madam Mayor, I will leave it and open for any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Petherick. My question goes back to MPAC, and I can't remember whether I've asked this before or not, but with them not picking that up, do we get any back taxes on that, or does it start now and move forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. So through you, Madam Mayor, the way the legislation is written is we have up to 3 years to be able to go back and sort of put that assessment on those properties and collect the taxes as if they were due in those years. If anything that falls beyond that point, that would be lost money to us. I can tell you that that didn't happen. We haven't lost any tax revenue on those properties. I think most of them were about 2 years, but I think some of them may have been the third year, but most of them were in the 1 to 2 year range.
So is there any grace on that? I mean, that could be a pretty hefty bill if they end up having to come up with 3 years of taxes. Do we give them some grace on that, or how does that work?
Yes, so through your Madam Mayor, we do bill it, and we do bill it typically all at once. But we are always willing to work with property owners if there's having some issues with that, because sometimes it does come as a bit of a surprise to them. MPAC does send out their assessment notices, but as we know, that doesn't necessarily mean people quite understand how that translates. I mean, I know MPAC is doing, at least from my perspective, they're doing a much better job of trying to explain what some of this information that people receive from MPAC and what that means and what they can expect in the future. But that doesn't always necessarily mean people sort of make that correlation to say, right, this is what MPAC says my house is worth, but they don't necessarily know that that means the tax bill is going to be coming. So we do try to work with property owners that may fall into the position that they actually do need some grace and getting those payments, and we're always willing to work with them.
And just one final question on that. Is there anything that we have in checks and balances that when we let them know, I'm assuming that MPAC gets the information once they get occupancy permits. Do we have anything in our computer system that would flag that and say they haven't paid it, and then we tap MPAC on the shoulder, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's another great question. So through Madam Mayor, at the moment, no. So between the financial software that we use and it's what the building department uses for their building permit activity, there isn't a connection between the two. So it's something that, and I think Councilor Merlehan raised it in the first full report of saying, can't we do a better job of tracking these things? And that is something that, as staff, we're going to be doing that this year. Yeah, because I think once we miss 200 properties, that's not good for anybody. And so we need to do a much better job of being able to understand what permits have been out there, when did the occupancy occur, and have we seen it, and does MPAC have that information? Because typically they would, but we just want to follow up, I guess, on the property tax side to make sure that if it hasn't been picked up in a time, we can go actually ask them and say, why haven't we seen that yet? So it's something that from a staff level, we need to get better at.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor
Merlehan.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to, I'm guessing it's going to be the rec department. I just was going through some of the work things, and I don't know if that happened the last quarter or if it was this quarter and I didn't notice, but I just noticed that there's a project to undertake the stabilization of the Canagajig Creek in Bolander Park. And that, it's been on there for quite a while. I think probably about at least 4 or 5 years anyway. And I'm just wondering what changed on that project. I know no funding has come in, but it was deemed kind of dangerous banks at one point, was cordoned off. So I'm just wondering if you could give an update on that particular project.
Thomas, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, to Councillor Merlian. So it is my understanding that we were seeking grant funding to undertake that work in 2021, and we were unsuccessful in receiving that grant. That being said, I believe that I would have to refer back to Ann Roberts, but I believe that Tweak has done some work to stabilize the bank. We haven't seen any further erosion in the last couple of years, so we're just kind of continuing to monitor, and if deemed necessary, we'll definitely budget for that in the future. But yeah, just for this year, we were unsuccessful.
Okay, so would we not just keep it on the project list then as watching out for that, or I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess we monitor the park, and if the issue becomes any worse, then we will need to budget for and address it. At the current time, I don't think, to my knowledge, again, I'd have to refer back to Ann Roberts in that group, but I don't think it's in a dire state at the moment.
Okay, so there isn't any potential danger to the public. I know there was a fence around part of the area there. Has that been removed then?
Yeah, we had some snow fence there, I believe, for a couple of years, and I think that was removed last year, if my memory is correct.
Okay, thanks a lot. I just was curious.
Yeah.
Anything else on this report? Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, Mayor, through you. So the 2.5% base change target, that is what's required to maintain current servicing, even though we expect inflation to actually be a little bit higher than that, 2.5%. Does that include increased staffing in our roads department that I think we had kind of earmarked? We've done some temporary stuff leading up to this year, but I thought we were going to have some full-time staff added this year. Is that included? Am I reading that correctly?
So through you, Madam Mayor. So that I think we're kind of getting a little bit into the next item, which is the budget development report, and we're still kind of on
sorry about that. Oh, my apologies. I'm so excited here. I'm racing ahead. I apologize.
We're going to get there really soon.
I sincerely apologize.
All right. Is there anything else on the quarterly report? And then we'll let Richard move on to the budget development, and we're looking forward to giving you some further guidance so that you can prepare a wonderful budget for us.
I get the first question, right, Mayor?
You will be first on the list.
Well, I swear we'll try not to ruin the thunder and not answer your question and let you ask it. So through you, Madam Mayor, yeah, we're at that time of year where we are talking about budget. And as we've typically done, this is an opportunity that we want to give council to have some direction and input and guidance to staff on really what factors we want to see when we're kind of working through and developing the list upcoming years of 2022 budget. So there are a number of key recommendations from a staff level that are contained in the report. I'll just kind of highlight on a few of them. So the first one, and some of them really start to blend and tie into each other. And the first one is still seeking council's direction to keep the existing service levels as we have provided in the 2021 budget to continue into the 2022 budget. I can say from a staff perspective that does become increasingly difficult to do. Just because with the growth that we have, with the changes of legislation that does occur, it does become a bit of a challenge to continue to keep that existing service levels, without having additional resources. And some of that really comes into the fact or into play when we start talking about the new assessment growth. So, one of the things that the report does indicate is projection of new assessment growth roughly around 3 to 4%. I can tell you with what we're seeing from the supplemental, and I've done some preliminary calculations, we're sitting at about, I think about 3.29% right now is where our new assessment growth going into 2022 is looking like. But then again, anything from a write-off can actually decrease that new assessment. And as I said before, I don't think we've seen all of the new assessment that is going to be coming on for 2022. So I still say anywhere between 3 and 4% is likely where we're going to fall. And where should this really be projected to? This really needs to go into our operating and our capital budgets, because we are really starting to see a lot of pinch points from growth. Whether that's additional resources we're going to need from staffing, not to get into Counsel and McMillan's question, but a little bit, into like some potential staffing needs, some potential additional materials, additional external contracts, something to do to make sure that we're, providing the current level of service that we're giving our residents right now. Then sort of moving on a little bit into where we like to see the base change go. We're recommending 2.5%. As the report indicates, a number of leading economists are projecting the CPI to be in around 2.5% in 2022. I think the last I heard, we were sitting just over 3%. I think it's the last where I've seen CPI. So I think part of this, we've seen it even in the construction industry where materials are more expensive. So we kind of fall into that where we have to buy materials. We see increases on that. We've seen increases in our external contracts because, they obviously, experienced the increases from the materials that they have to buy. So that's what staff is recommending when we prepare the 2022 budget on, is at 2.5%. But also in addition to that, we're looking at continuing to build upon the infrastructure levy. We took a pause in 2021, but staff's recommending that we continue to build that fund out. Right now, we're directing about $1.1 million into the infrastructure reserve fund to be used for infrastructure related projects. Looking at another 1.5% in 2022. And as well as adding about 0.85% for the climate action greening infrastructure levy. And this is coming from the resolution that was presented or passed through Council through R07 2021, where you put $100,000 or committed $100,000 into the 2022 budget, and that works out to about 0.85%. I think one of the things that's not in here, and I was thinking about it just the other day, actually today I was thinking about it, is, maybe Council might have some thoughts on our COVID relief fund. As Council recalls, we put 0.5%, about $56,000 into the 2021 budget. So when we get into the 2022, who knows where this pandemic is going to go? We may want to continue on with having that COVID relief fund available to Council for helping residents, helping businesses as we get in and hopefully out of this pandemic as we get into 2022 and hopefully before then. So maybe Council want to give some consideration on that. I think the other thing that I want to highlight really comes on the additional budget pressures. There's a number of things that we're starting to track as we get into 2022. I think some of them have been before Council previously. Talking about bike lanes, multimodal, anything to do with supporting active transportation, having that discussion through the 2022 budget process. And as I said before, it's becoming increasingly difficult to get all the work that we need to get done with the resources we have, whether that is financial resources, human capital, and that may be looking back again at, long-term borrowing plans. We put in $727,000 into this year's budget, but we're doing that as an internal borrow. I don't think we can continue to internal borrow amongst ourselves. But if we want to continue to do, I would say, a good sizable renewal program, we may have to look at, if we're not going to be successful in grants or even to leverage grants, we may have to look at some long-term borrowings to be able to do that. There's some other things. I think tonight we're going to be talking about the where the outdoor recreation amenities master plan is going. We know that's going through. We know there's going to be some recommendations coming out of that and potential. We're not sure what sort of implementation costs are going to be coming out of that. That's going to be something that will be discussed, but it's definitely a pressure. Affordable housing. I think this Council's talked about it. We're going to see some pressures, and what do we want to do in the 2022 budget that we can do to help address the affordable housing issue specifically in Woolwich. So there are a number of things that we are tracking, a number of things that are going to eventually shape the 2022 budget. So kind of like just heading back off into the recommendations, we do have the it is the 2022 budget. It should say 2022 budget schedule, not the 2021 budget that's in the recommendation. It's attached to this report as Appendix A. So besides this meeting, essentially we're going to be engaging council in budget deliberations starting in the second week of January. And of course, this being a council night, we didn't want to just have council make a decision tonight. Typically, we like to make these things and bring these things forward to council in a committee setting. So then you do have that time for second sober thought when a recommendation comes back. So the last recommendation in this report is whatever decision council may make tonight or direction given, that all of this comes back for final approval at the council meeting of September 21st, 2021. So at that, Madam Mayor, I think I will leave it and open it up to the floor for questions.
Thank you. I believe Councillor McMillan has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. And might I just say, Mr. Petherick, that report made a lot more sense when I had the right one open while you were reading it. So yeah, my question was the 2.5% base increase and maintaining current service standards with the expected inflation of at least that much. Is that added work, the added road crew staff included in that maintenance of current service standards?
Yeah, so through you, Madam Mayor, I think the best way to probably approach it is it's kind of hard to tell because I think Mr. Poupé has to still bring his report back to council and start to lay out what some of those costs are going to look like and some of his recommendations on what staffing is needed. And from that, I think we're going to have to pull from our new assessment growth to really kind of help that. I think our base increase is really what's going to have to help us maintain our existing service levels, specifically with the things that we're doing already with our existing staff, including the material costs that we're starting to see some pretty sizable increases on as well. I don't have anything like in a concrete of what those increases are looking like, but we're just starting to see from our suppliers some increased costs. And we're going to expect to see that, I think, going forward even into 2022. So as we start to look at new staffing, particularly in the roads area, I think it's going to have to be a combination that, some of the 2.5 may be taken up from this, but also I think even from the new assessment growth. But, I think it's something that Jared, by all fairness, has to bring the report to council and start to have that conversation and start to have that feedback in, and that's going to sort of form what we're going to be doing into the 2022 budget. And that may not quite answer your question, but hopefully it sheds a little bit of light, at least on my thinking.
Yeah, that clarifies things. Thank you.
Other questions, Councillor Martin?
Thank you. So if I read this correctly, we're looking at a 4.85% increase coming out of the gate. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct, Councillor Martin. Yeah, we're looking at 2.5 for base, 1.5 for the special infrastructure levy, and 0.85 for the climate action greening.
And that's not including any new employees for our road works. That's just a high increase. Like, I think you're going to have a hard time pushing that through.
Okay. Other questions, Councillor Shantz?
Yeah, thank you through you to this, Mr. Petherick. And I'm on the same page as what Councillor Martin is. That kind of struck me pretty harsh that we're going to be just shy of 5% increase. We've never had that increase recently. And I guess I was always nervous when we passed a budget item before budget, and that put us in the negative right at the offset. So I think we have to look at, see how we can bring this down a little bit. I can't see us pushing through a 4.85% increase in this climate when we really don't know what's going to happen with the COVID going forward and things like that. I think we have to be a little bit little easier on the public on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. So two comments. So one, I think any direction that council were to give through this report, or at least some initial feedback to kind of help staff as we're formulating the draft 2022 budget, doesn't mean that that's where council is going to end up when we get there. A lot of things can change. We could be in like the best economic position right now, put the COVID pandemic aside, everything could be humming along. We're thinking we're going to be, good, whatever the increase that may have come out of council, through a staff recommendation was great. We get into January and something like a pandemic happened. Yeah, obviously, things are going to change. I think they're going to change within the next 5 months. Whatever recommendation comes out, council can always change their mind as when we get to it. I think my other comment, and I think it may partly address Councillor Johnson, even Councillor Martin's comments about 4.85%. I think it comes back into what is council's priority. I think that's really what it comes down to. Are we talking, because we're starting to put money in for, to achieve, some climate action, the 80 by 30, starting to continue on putting money in for infrastructure. So, and then the other side of it is still just trying to put in money that we can actually keep up with our existing services. So really, I think it's that trying to find the right balance to say, what is the priority of council? Is it infrastructure renewal? Is it the climate, or is it actually providing services at our existing levels to our residents and businesses? Or is it going to be somewhat of a combination of, there may be a slight in all three? I'm not sure. I think that's really what this night is about, is trying to, maybe help staff sort of find what that direction, or some of the preliminary thoughts of what council's thinking about as we get into the 2022 budget.
David?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I just want to clarify something because Richard, answered Councillor McMillan in terms of, future bringing forward of the Director of Infrastructure's report regarding the need for additional roads and water and wastewater staff. And Richard had indicated that, to Councillor McMillan, that ultimately we would probably have to look at a combination of using the inflation and the assessment growth. Councillor Martin, I think you made the point that you saw that we would have to have an addition over and above. I don't think that was the intention of what Richard answered. So I want a consistent message here, in terms of the potential addition of those staff and where the funding. It wasn't intended as Councillor Martin, you had been concerned that we would be going above the 4.85. The other thing is to Councillor Chance's point. In fairness, it was not lost on senior management in preparing the budget parameters report that this council has been reluctant to set parameters, which some previous councils have been willing to do. We appreciate that, but what we've always appreciated, and Richard and I talked about this at great length, is we always have some level of direction coming from council. So ideally, we'd love you to, let us know what you support, in terms of our recommendations, if any. But at the very least, what you've always been good at, and maybe not always finding consensus, but at least we're able to glean appropriate direction from the input you receive and we record, is what is important, as Richard noted, what are some of the important priorities, where you want to see the investment. But I was glad Richard, in his latest comments, noted, I think what we are starting to see, and we wanted to outline for council in the fullness of information, is the fact that as we, want to continue to do more in the area of infrastructure. And now we want to up the game in terms of climate change. And we would like to do and dip our toe in affordable housing. We may very well, if you want to keep, more of a lid, if you will, for lack of a better choice of words, on what the tax rate increase would be, we'll at times maybe then have to make tough choices. But at the end of the day, what we're looking for from council is what would be the service or program level priorities. So I just wanted to reinforce those points.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I'm glad that we're having this discussion in August. Councillor Martin and Councillor Shantz talk about 4.85 being too much. And I think that that's appropriate to have that feeling, but I think we as a council need to decide what's getting cut. Our township is growing, the population is growing, inflation is happening, everything's getting more expensive. So the 2.85 seems, I was surprised that it was that at that level. Our population is growing. The services that we're providing, the parklands that we have to maintain, the roads that we have to maintain, they're growing. Inflation is happening. So is it the 2.85 that's going to get cut? Because nothing is getting less expensive. So if it's not that that's getting cut, is it the 1.5%, the infrastructure levy? Because we have an infrastructure deficit. And we had some meetings back in October, November, January, February last year, where we were arm wrestling over here to whether we're going to spend $4 million on a bridge or $8 million on a bridge. And so we're talking about dramatically increasing the amount of money we're going to spend on infrastructure. So are we going to then cut how much money we're raising for infrastructure? Or is it the 0.85, which is the smallest chunk out of the three? And just getting rid of that would get us down to 4%. But we as a council have taken accolades from community groups asking us to prioritize the environment. And I don't know, I guess my question to our council would be is if we're not comfortable with 4.85, what needs to get cut? Because, I'm sitting here thinking I'm not comfortable debenturing a full bridge that we can't afford. And I think the 1.5 should go up. And the 2.85 or the 2.5 likely has nowhere to go. And the 0.85 I think is a bare minimum. So the things that we've expressed that we value as a council in our chambers cost money. So if we want that bridge in Winterburn, if we want to cut our carbon emissions by 50% in 30 years, that's going to cost money. So I guess my question to council, not staff, is if we are going to cut, what's getting cut? What are our values?
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. And that is what we need to wrestle with this evening, partially. Councillor Redekop, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, 2022, we're going into an election year, and maybe 4.85% increase wouldn't look good on if we're going to look for re-election. That comes into play. But I think I agree with Councillor McMillan in that these are high priorities. And if we don't have this kind of increase, we're going to continue to fall behind in all three areas. Like if we don't have the CPI index followed, then we're going to fall behind because we can't do enough infrastructure or pay our staff well enough. And the infrastructure levy, since I've been on council for these 3 years, it's been said that we're behind on infrastructure, roads and bridges. So if we don't do that levy, we increase, then we're going to fall behind. And the greening levy is important. We've always heard it's important to most of our constituents. So I think it would be not in our interest to let that one go. So at this point, I'm okay with the direction that staff has sort of outlined here in its budget reflection.
Last year, our base increase was 1.42, and then we had 0.5% for COVID relief. So last year, we kept it quite light in light of COVID and some of the issues that people were dealing with then. Councillor Merlihan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, just some general comments, and then I do have a more specific question for staff. So we got 4.85, and then I know, you know, there's always lots of grumbling if I suggest that the new assessment growth, which is 3 to 4%, is actually a tax increase to everybody because it's money coming in that's just going into operating right away. So, you know, it is actually more than 4.85, the increase. As far as, you know, I think council's already made a bunch of decisions this year, and it's, you know, not a whole lot different from what Councillor McMillan and Councillor Redekop opined, you know, with the green infrastructure. The infrastructure, you know, we committed to a Peel Street Bridge pedestrian. I'm not comfortable debenturing the entire amount. So, you know, it costs money to do those kinds of projects, and we've already committed to them. So I really don't know where you push back on those things. As far as you know, the green stuff, I mean, what we're doing is a pittance of what we should be doing. So, you know, I don't know how you cut any more from that, and I hope, you know, by some of the projects being delayed this past year, and those the recharge stations that were grossly over priced and over budget, that we can put them into some meaningful projects. You know, I'm also looking at, was it 2 or 3 years down the road, we have downtown Elmira, which is like well beyond refurbishment, and we are going to have to put some money into downtown, into the sidewalks. The region doesn't pay for that, the streetscaping, and we need to do a good job on that. And I really, you know, I'm hoping we can, you know, talk about that again. We had one kind of offline meeting about that, and I think that needs to start. We need to start talking about it now, because the region is putting those plans forward, and we need to have a plan. Right now, we don't have anything, and they're kind of waiting for that to happen. So that costs money, and you know, you can't go to the Elmira BIA and say you guys are paying for it if you want it. We have to. The downtown needs to be a place for all the residents to enjoy, and it has to be done right. And so we need to start planning for that now in these budgets and put stuff away. As far as the staffing goes, I mean, we have been you know, supportive of adding some staff, and I think in past years the staff that we've been supportive of weren't the ones that we thought were coming, and it's been year after year where we talked about, you know, boots on the ground type of staff to get things done, and you know, garbage being emptied on time and things like that. I just came from out west, and the one thing I noticed about how clean everything was and how there was garbage cans everywhere, and the trails are beautiful, and there wasn't garbage anywhere that we went. And I thought, wouldn't that be, you know, nice to have in our own community? And you know, I walk to work sometimes. I walk downtown on my, there's garbage all over the place. I know that's not township staff problem, but it's a community problem where, you know, we allow our downtown areas to be kind of junky and sidewalks that aren't really all that safe to walk on and crosswalks that people trip on. And then the rest of, people throw garbage because, well, if the municipality's not looking after it, then why should they? And I'd really like that to be turned around, and that costs money. So if we could start putting these plans together, and I'd really, really appreciate if staff would look at those staffing concerns, those areas where council has brought it up for a number of years. And maybe fewer desk jobs and more people doing, the physical things that that people out there see and fixing of things. That's what I would like to see in this upcoming budget. And Mr. Petherick talking about bike lanes and multimodal type areas. We need to actually have a plan for that. I know there's been lots of talk about it, but we don't actually, even looking at Elmira, it's like there's areas that we're redeveloping Barn Swallow that could have, we could plan for where it's going to go around Elmira, through Elmira, and how it connects to some of the other towns and villages. I mean, we just need to look at a map and do that kind of thing and come up with a plan for that. Now, my specific question would be that I didn't see in the report is regarding the senior center, where Township or the council did have a resolution to renegotiate the agreement with that. Now, I think we're probably looking at about $7,000 to $10,000 in the budget. I'm just wondering if staff could speak to that and if there's been any movement on that file.
Ms. Horndal, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very timely question, Councilor Merlihan. We actually were speaking about this last week. As you'll recall, Council does have a grants to group process that a lot of our other organizations, not-for-profit organizations in Woolwich, apply for annually. And speaking with the Deputy Clerk, Jeff Smith, last week, we thought that might be the best way to handle it. I believe the grants are anywhere up to about $10,000. So that would build it into an annual operating, and that could be used as the cash component for the Senior Active Living Grant.
Okay, would that grant, would that be once you apply for it 1 year, then that's it? You just automatically get that money, or is it required that the seniors apply for it every year?
Jeff would probably be better to answer that. My understanding was it would be implemented for the term of council, but Jeff would probably be able to be better to answer.
Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. We do have grants that council has pre-approved for the term of council, but council also does look at those grants every year and sort of reconfirms them every budget year. So you can give some certainty by approving it for the term of council, and then still have the flexibility to look at each grant every year during the budget process.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought it was a grant from somewhere else. It's just the regular grants that we do every year. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the other grant you're just saying then is the work in lieu of then would just continue on. Is that what you would propose then if we went this other route?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, so as the term of the SALT grant through the province, we have to provide a certain percentage, either in cash or in lieu. So we would maintain the in lieu and then supplement with the in cash as well.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. Okay, thanks for informing us.
Welcome.
Other comments? I'm just Googling CPI just to put that in, and it looks like they're projecting 2.5 for next year. Mr. Petherick, is that sort of where you're coming from with the 2.5?
Yes, Madam Mayor. That's the latest that I saw from some of the leading economists.
Other questions? Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I just have to say that I agree with some of Councilor Merlehan's comments. 0.85 for greening, I think, is a pittance. And I think that it's one of the most important issues that we're facing as a municipality, as a province, as a country. It is an election year, as Councilor Redicott pointed out, but I'm not sure that putting our budget where our values are isn't the right move to be making going into a budget. And I just wonder, is there room, is it tonight for conversations about some of the things that Councilor Merlehan raised, the greening infrastructure? Are we doing enough? And downtown Elmira is an issue that I hear a lot about. And it's not just the bypass. A lot of it's the bypass, but a lot of it is, people would like to see an investment in our core. They want a core that they can be proud of, and that is going to cost money. So I think those are good conversations for us to have as a council. 4.85 is too high already. Talking about making that higher, is that something we want to do? But there are things that we care about, and those things cost money. So I wonder if that's a conversation that we want to have as a council.
Yeah, I think tonight is a night to have some of that conversation for sure. I would add, and this kind of goes back to your first comments, I think, Councillor McMillan, that we are growing, and or maybe Mr. Petherick said it. It was somewhere at the beginning of the discussion, but we are a growing municipality. And if you look at sizes of municipalities across Ontario, we are not small. We are in the, medium. We're not in the large, but we're certainly not also in the small. And so at some point, there's a tipping point where we have to start looking at ourselves as we hope to be and where we're going. And, part of that comes through our new assessment growth. And so at what point do we need to make sure that new assessment growth is actually funding the growth that we need to see to be a medium-sized municipality. Councillor Shantz, did you have your hand up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I did. And I guess I'm just putting the brakes on because we don't know what the future is bringing. We're probably in the fourth stage of the pandemic, and we don't know what that's going to look like. So that was the only reason I was throwing up the caution flag. I guess I'm going to be blunt about this. I hear Elmira, and I hear a lot of people complaining that Elmira gets everything. And has anybody been down to Main Drag of Breslau lately, for instance? And, so, when we start talking and everything goes to Elmira, let's watch what we say. That's all I'm saying.
Councillor Merlehan.
Sorry, through you, just a response to the last one. I like to look at when we look at the budget, I look at from a township wide perspective. And as far as Breslau goes, if there's things there, we try and treat the communities the same way. So recently there was some complete non-story about Breslau people. All of a sudden they are not happy about not having a splash pad, and Elmira has a splash pad, but this goes back and forth. It's a community gift that was given to Elmira. That same gift could be in the process in Breslau. There's been a lot of time spent in Breslau trying to get just park amenities there that seem to be difficult on deciding what would go in there. And I know the committee that Ward 3 people sat on, was a difficult one that didn't really, I'm not sure if they came up with a plan or not. It just kind of finished. But, I bring up Elmira things because those are my constituents. Those are the people that vote for me, and I bring that up on a regular basis. So if there's things in Breslau that and other Ward 3, the Winterburn, we hear from them, then I'd like to hear about it. I'm not there all the time, and I'm not talking to people there all the time. So certainly that would be a position of Ward 3 and Ward 2. Same thing. So Elmira is the largest community in the settlement and are in Woolwich Township, and so the major items, the recreation and things like that, go to the center, and that's not uncommon in many municipalities. But I'm certainly supportive of a bunch of different things that have gone on in our other wards because they make all the township better. And I really don't like when I hear, oh, Elmira has everything. It's kind of whiny, and it's what can we do to get some different things and spread out across the municipality and into some of the other things. I'm certainly willing to have those conversations, and but they haven't come to council. So until they do, then maybe those communities won't get anything. So by all means, let's have the conversation about how we make Woolwich better. And Elmira, the downtown Elmira is long overdue. It was supposed to be refurbished by the region in 2013, and it has not gotten better since then. The infrastructure is beyond failing, and we need to start putting some money in the bank because it's only a couple of years away that we're going to have to deal with it and put some money up. So that is an Elmira problem.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you, I certainly, just speaking for myself, bring an Elmira focus to the table, and I think it's a fair critique from Councillor Shantz. And I think that we talk about being in Woolwich and the region concentrates services in Kitchener and Waterloo, and we get forgotten about here. And I think in the township we have similar problems with focus being in Elmira and some of the smaller settlements being forgotten. So I think it's a fair critique, and I appreciate Councillor Shantz doing his job for his constituents to bring us back around to thinking about the entire township. So fair critique, and certainly a valid one, and one that we need to think about at all times here.
Thank you. I would take this opportunity maybe to say that we do try to look at Breslau as well, and we're looking at how, as Breslau grows, we can create some kind of a central area for Breslau, and so it's not that it's forgotten. We certainly talk about it quite a bit as we look at how we develop our new subdivisions and how we can create some kind of a downtown and a little more retail presence in Breslau. That's maybe an aside from the budget, but it is part of the discussion. Is there anything else bringing us back to the budget? Is there other direction? Because so far, I think I've heard that we feel like 4.85 sounds really high, but we've also, I think, indicated that there are projects that we feel we need to do. So I haven't heard a lot of ideas on bringing that down, or even if we should. So if we're relatively happy with that, we can give staff the direction to go ahead as they've outlined here. I did see a hand. Was it Councillor McMillan? Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you. Sorry, I was trying to tack this on to the end of my last comment and I forgot. The Peel Street Bridge. is there any money in this budget or in that infrastructure levy with the 1.5% increase that we could dedicate to the Peel Street Bridge? Or is this 1.5% increase with the infrastructure levy still leaving us in a position to debenture the entire project?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I would say right now, even the current infrastructure levy that we have built up right now is not going to be able to be used for Peel Street. I think we have so much work on that's going on, and whether that would be Mr. Poupé, whether that would be Ann MacArthur talking about it, even Thomas on the line, they'd probably say the same thing. We just don't have enough to do everything. But that doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't mean that we have to dementia the whole entire Peel Street. I think when we went through that project, I think one of the things I said was we were receiving additional money from the federal government, from the federal gas tax, which is now the Canada Community Building Fund. So I think we can sort of look at putting some more of that funds. So whether it's that gas tax or some other source that we can try to find to start to direct that. So it's not all being debentured. But once again, everything all has to be put into the mix, and I would say all into the mix in the absence of council giving like concrete direction to staff. We would look at it from the perspective of, what funding can we have to be directed towards projects, including Peel Street, so we don't have to debenture the whole entire thing. And for the most part, I think that's really my opinion. I think we need to have that discussion at a senior staff level. But, I did say it, I think when we did have the Peel Street discussion, that we were receiving this additional funds from the federal government, and we could direct some of that money. We already are from an engineering perspective doing that, but we can actually direct even more towards our project so that not all of it has to be debentured. What we're receiving definitely isn't going to cover the full price tag. There'll definitely be a funding gap.
I'm going to go to Councillor Martin and then Councillor Shantz and Councillor McMillan. Go ahead.
Thank you. There's one project we haven't discussed at all that is much more important than a Peel Street Bridge and some other things, and that is the drainage issue in Breslau. We've been working at that 4 or 5 years, and the people have been waiting and waiting and waiting, and yet every spring they get flooded out. And the reason we haven't moved ahead with it is because Jared said it was going to cost the municipality about $1 million. That's a project that we have to deal with, and we should be dealing with it sooner than later.
Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I wish we would have the outdoor amenities plan to look at that. It would be good to talk about that prior to what we're talking about tonight, because I think we have to look at what our needs and our wants are. And I look at needs being infrastructure and things that are falling apart that have to be repaired. Those are needs. And wants are like our recreation stuff that people want to have, but can we afford it? And without seeing the amenities plan, it's hard to even move forward on this discussion as to whether 4.85 is reasonable or not. And I guess so. I guess I'm no decision on the answer of 4.85 at this point, I guess.
We could just hold off on finishing this discussion until after we get the verbal update, if that's what council's wish is. Councillor McMillan, or Councillor Shantz, did you want to have another comment?
Well, I guess I don't know what's going to be in that verbal update, but if it would help us with this, I think it would be worthwhile to hear about it.
Okay, Councillor McMillan, you had your hand up, I think. Did you want to jump in here, and then we'll look at whether council wants to move the verbal update ahead of the decision on this?
If you don't mind, Mayor, I think my question is connected to this and might not be answered tonight. So if you don't mind, I think I could ask it now. We have our 1.5% infrastructure levy increase that is ongoing. what's our current infrastructure levy up to? And is that closing our infrastructure deficit, or at that rate is our infrastructure deficit still increasing but at a slower rate? And if we need more time to get an answer to that, I completely understand. I don't need an answer to that tonight, but I think we need to understand as a council, are we getting closer to eliminating that infrastructure deficit, or is that speeding away from us as we go? Because I think we need to know that to know whether 1.5% is sufficient for our infrastructure levy increase.
As I recall, when we started doing that infrastructure levy, we were putting that in place so that we could leverage funds from other levels of government. Often when they say, you know, it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 or whatever, that we would have some funds available to do that. But you're right, Councillor McMillan, we should be moving ahead in you know, getting ahead in our infrastructure deficit regardless. Mr. Patrick, what can you tell us?
So through you, Madam Mayor. So at the very least, I can say that we are directing just over $1.1 million into our infrastructure reserve fund right now every year, unless council redirects what we've built up in the past. That's what we're doing each and every year. You know, I can tell you from discussions at senior management, it's still not enough. I don't really have a good sense as to whether we are catching up or we are not getting farther behind as fast. I would say we're not getting farther behind as fast. I think that's probably a really good thing to say. You know, and one of the things that we also were pretty, you know, very fortunate about is we have received some grant funding fairly recently. Glasgow Street Bridge is a great example. You know, that is a piece of infrastructure that is being partly paid for by the federal and the provincial government through the ISIP. You know, so that's great, and those types of grants help. You know, but would I say that we're really catching up? I would say anecdotally, no. I think we would probably really have to go do a deep dive in and look at our infrastructure again and kind of figure out where our deficit currently sits at. But my sense is that no, we're still pretty far behind. You know, I think everything that we built up so far helps it tremendously, and I don't want to diminish that. Like it does help, and I think, you know, this council and councils in the past should be commended for taking that step and putting aside money, continuing to do that, because it's the right thing to do. You know, and I can say from our perspective, we were the leaders in it. I've seen more and more municipalities doing that, and they're starting to do that. And I've had people reach out and say, how did you do that? And it was to say, our council took the stand and say, this is important. This is important to us. This is important to our community. We need to do it. And you did it. And I say, you know, good job. But ultimately, I don't have a good answer for you right at the moment on our infrastructure deficit.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brenneman, go ahead.
So I just wanted to make council aware that rec staff are just going to be giving a very general update on the outdoor recreation amenities plan. I wouldn't suggest that there will be any specifics tonight, and I've confirmed this with staff. You know, that will be helpful to this discussion. It's still early going in terms of all of that. So I just wanted to make you aware of that you could continue with this discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Mohan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Shantz. Just a suggestion moving forward for the next, you know, bunch of years. As Woolwich has probably about a good 20 years of growth through the developments that we currently have, and this year seems to be probably one of the higher new assessment growths that we've had since I've been on council. It's usually it's somewhere in the 2% or so range, and 3 to 4%. You know, seems pretty good. I'm just wondering if we just any of the new assessment growth, instead of plowing it just into the operating budget, why don't we say, like right now, 1.5% of all the new assessment growth for the next, 10 to 20 years goes right into the infrastructure levy on top of whatever the 1 point, if a council continues to do 1.5 or whatever, but just make that whatever the assessment growth is and do 1.5. The other point, Councillor Martin's point about the drainage in Breslau, I also feel that's important. I remember years ago when we first looked at it and all the people's pictures that they spent of being flooded out and everything is something that we should be putting some plans together to make that happen. So I would support further exploration and getting that done, and the sooner the better.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I think, well, there is a recommendation in front of you. Would someone care to move the recommendation as it's been presented, or Mr. Brenneman, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, sorry for interjecting, but I believe Mr. Petherick in his opening remarks said that council could, just hold this discussion and any final decision because we normally like sober second thought, and for this to continue between two meetings before making any decision. You would have the option, I just wanted to remind council, you would have the option that this could come back for final debate discussion for September the 14th, I believe, Richard?
21st.
21st. So I just wanted to point that out as an option, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess I was assuming you'd look for, I guess, direction then as opposed to an actual motion tonight. Is that what you'd be looking for? David or Richard?
I think in fairness, what Richard was trying to point out is that really council could have this debate and discussion over 2 nights and provide final support and direction at the next meeting. Certainly we've been able to, as I said in even my earlier remarks, there have been nuggets that have come out of the meeting in terms of council's priorities, in terms of their interest. We've heard everything from downtown Elmira to don't forget about the fact that we're a community of communities, to don't forget about the fact that, yes, we have made commitments on climate change. So, we are understanding all of that. And obviously, Richard and I are taking notes on all of that. So we have received some preliminary direction, but I think it was Richard's intention that by all means, you could have final debate and a decision and direction at the very next meeting, if you so wished.
Sure. Councillor McMillan, did you have your hand up? The Hollywood Square is moved and
Yeah, I did. I was just wondering, the 6th bullet on the recommendation is decide on the final recommendation and direction for the draft 2022 budget be brought forward to council meeting of September 21st. Would that be the meeting that Mr. Brenneman is talking about, having that second night? So with that final bullet in the recommendation, having that final recommendation on the 21st, just like Mr. Brenneman suggested, I'd be prepared to move the recommendation as written.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Councillor Redicott, is there discussion on that before we go to the vote? Councillor Martin, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I was just going to say I'm not in any position to go along with the recommendation at this point. There's too many unanswered questions for me.
Okay. Councillor Merlehan and then McMillan.
Yeah, do we have to vote on this tonight? If we're going to come back and do it on the 21st, I'm happy just to do it on the 21st and have another discussion. Especially some of the things I suggested. I mean, there's probably lots of reasons why we shouldn't do that, but maybe they'll have those answers then, and I'd rather vote now. I mean, Yeah, I'm probably with Murray on that one.
Okay, I think it's neither here nor there really whether we take the vote tonight. Because the vote tonight directs us to look at it again on the 21st. So, Councillor McMillan?
Yeah, we're not passing the budget tonight. It's just a high level direction. And I think that I just looking back to see what the schedule is here. But I think between now and the end of September, there are some things that staff were kind of probably going to be getting some ducks in a row. And if we at least have a vote tonight, if we vote tonight and it's 4-1 against a 4.85, staff have some direction for the next month. And if we don't vote tonight, they're going off of what we said, which is probably just as concrete as a vote, but at least it's a month where there's some direction. And it kind of lets them start to get some ducks in a row while also leaving that door open to change our mind after some reflection and further discussion.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor. So if there's no further discussion on it, I'll call the question, understanding that either way, this will come back on September 21st. Is that, unless staff tells me I'm wrong? Okay. All right. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay. So what this is just giving a general direction to staff basically until September 21st, when we'll come back and discuss it further. And but I think it gives staff some indication that we're not going to totally slash the proposal that they've put forward here. Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll move on then. Ms. Horndal, you are up with a verbal update on the outdoor amenities plan. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. I did want to provide you tonight with a brief update of our progress to date on the long-range plan for outdoor recreation amenities. I do want to preface this by saying that with the reopening of all of our programs and facilities to the public, staff have been working through a number of priorities this summer. So I may not have as many answers for you this evening as you were expecting a couple of minutes ago. The intent of our working group right now is to gather good, solid information from the community and gather best practices through our comparators to allow us to develop a strong strategic plan to guide us through the next 10 years. The team, made up of staff from Recreation and Community Services and Development Services, has been working on a variety of items over the summer, including the development of an inventory and map of all existing parks, green spaces, and amenities by community, identification of areas of growth, population, and demographics through the next 10 years that may trigger acquisition and development by community, a review and assessment of current legislation, industry standards, and policies that guide the development and provision of outdoor spaces, an identification of a hierarchy for all of our parks, sports fields, and trails with respect to service standards. And staff are also currently gathering information around industry standards and comparators for maintenance and staffing costs and support of specific amenities. The community engagement process is in full swing. We were thrilled to secure a grant from the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association for a fully funded summer student. Narami Gonzalez Diaz joined our department in early July, and she is a recent graduate from the University of Waterloo Recreation Program and is starting her master's in recreation next week. She has been working hard all summer developing our engagement pieces around the theme of discover, explore, and shape our outdoors. Our community-wide survey launched in early August and was promoted throughout the township through social media, e-blasts, and 11 pop-up events in each community throughout Woolwich. And I'm thrilled to tell you that we have received over 350 surveys to date. So within a month, we're quite thrilled with that. The survey and promotion will remain live until approximately the end of September and will help us to shape the goals, values, and objectives for upcoming community forums and interviews with targeted interest groups, which will be occurring throughout the fall as per our work plan. We will be bringing forward another quick report with some of our findings in the next several months, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Questions? I don't see any questions, so thank you very much for that update.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to other business. I don't have a report tonight on the region. Councillors, any reports from you? No. Seeing none. Outstanding activity list? Nothing. Okay, motion that the following bylaws be introduced and read for a first and second time, and you can see them printed there. We had the bylaw to govern the proceedings of public meetings, bylaw to lift reserves for Empire communities, bylaw for establishing the parking of motor vehicles on private property, and a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council's meeting today. Moved by someone, Councillor Merlehan, seconded by Councillor Redicott. All those in favor? That's carried. Motion that the committee of the whole rise and report to council. Moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That is carried. A motion that council confirms and adopts the proceedings of committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Redicott, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. Correspondence. There's only one item of correspondence on the agenda this evening, and that's from Gravel Watch. Does anyone want to speak to that, or? Nope, not seeing anything there. There is no public notice, no notice of closed meetings, and no notice of motion. Then we need a motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 49-2021 to 52-2021, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That is carried, and that brings us to the end of the meeting. Motion to adjourn to meet again in regular session on Tuesday, September 21st. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That is carried, and so I would like to thank everyone who participated this evening or tuned into the meeting. Council, please stay connected on Zoom until Alex confirms that the live stream has stopped. And good night, everyone. We'll see you in September. I know.